You're listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast about all things talent management for social impact organizations. This episode is part of a special series with Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR. This special series focuses on all things organizational culture. Never miss an episode of The Switch. Visit us online at nonprofithr.com/The Switch. And now for some information about our conversation host. Driven to serve the often overlooked people management needs for the social impact sector, Lisa Brown Alexander set out to build a market where one didn't exist. She founded Nonprofit HR in 2000, the leading talent management firm in the country that works exclusively with the nonprofit sector. A serial entrepreneur, Lisa is also co-founder of Wellspring Manor and Spa, located in Prince George's County, Maryland. Lisa's goal is to ensure that every nonprofit HR engagement inspires social sector leaders to strengthen their most important asset, their people. Over the course of her career, Lisa has presented to hundreds of organizations, staff, and leadership teams, covering all things talent management for the social sector. Nonprofit HR has also been listed by Inc. 5000 as one of the nation's fastest growing companies. For this episode, Lisa Brown Alexander will interview Deborah Rutter, president of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Deborah is one of the leading voices in arts administration today. As leader of the National Cultural Center, Rutter oversees programming across all genres, as well as a global network of education initiatives. In 2019, Rutter opened The Reach, the first expansion of the center's campus designed to bring audiences into the artistic process, setting the stage for a dynamic era of growth. She has expanded programming to fully represent the diversity of arts in America and introduced social impact and wellness programs across communities. Rutter sits on the board of Vital Voices, is a member of the board of directors of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and served as co-chair of its Commission on the Arts. In recognition of her advocacy for the role art plays in diplomacy, she was one of the inaugural recipients of the European Union's Transatlantic Bridge Award in 2022. Here at the Kennedy Center, Deborah held executive leadership roles with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra Association, the Seattle Symphony, the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And now, here's Lisa and Deborah.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for joining us here at The Switch, the podcast for Nonprofit HR. I'm delighted to welcome you to our conversation today and wondered if we could open the conversation by talking a little bit about the Kennedy Center, who the Kennedy Center is, what it represents, both in the district and nationally.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's great to be in conversation with you. I really appreciate who you are, what you do, and your organization. So this is really a joy for me too. Thank you. And thank you for that question, because of course I love talking about the Kennedy Center. This is your cultural center. We were created in 1958 by an act of Congress. President Eisenhower signed legislation creating the National Cultural Center. And I think this is sometimes less known across the country. I think people in the district, Maryland, Virginia, the DMV region, know who we are and think of us as their local performing arts center, and probably have a sense that we're the memorial to John F. Kennedy. But across the country, most people don't really know that. While Eisenhower signed us into legislation and created us in 1958, they didn't raise very much money over the first number of years. Actually, he and President Kennedy and their spouses were very actively involved with raising money to build the cultural center. Didn't go very well at the time. But as many people know, Jackie Kennedy was a big proponent for the arts, and she rubbed off on her husband just a little bit, which is really great. And at his passing, Congress asked her, how would you like him to be remembered? And she said, we want to make the National Cultural Center a living memorial to John F. Kennedy. And so it was really through that period of time that we became not just the National Cultural Center, but the living memorial to John F. Kennedy, as well as written in the original legislation, we would be the national advocate for arts education. So you couldn't ask for a better sort of mission for an arts administrator such as myself than to have those three pillars, arts education, world-class arts, and then the living memorial to John F. Kennedy. And it is so through this last half century of work that we have endeavored to really represent all of America on our stages and to welcome America and the world to our venue to really understand and celebrate the arts as a cultural leader in this country, and also a way to demonstrate to the world who Americans are and what the art in America looks like.
Wonderful. That's so helpful. I've lived in Washington for 35 years and didn't fully know that history. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. And as we talk about and help people understand the history behind the Kennedy Center, let's take a look backstage, if I can use that analogy.
Sure.
To the workforce of the Kennedy Center, the engine that keeps that institution moving. Can you talk with us a little bit about the workforce of the Kennedy Center, how it's distributed? Are you an on-site organization only? Are you operating as a hybrid organization? Give us a behind-the-scenes view, if you would.
Okay, sure. Now, before the pandemic, life was just a little bit different, of course, than the way it is today. And if I may use this as a crude way of describing it, before the pandemic, we issued about 3,000 W-2s. That means that 3,000 people earned sort of what you might consider their wage. Some of that was through seasonal work or part-time work as stagehands or otherwise, and some of it were as union musicians or parking lot attendants, et cetera. We have quite a number of people who think of the Kennedy Center as their employer. And then on top of that, we have about 1,500 who receive 1099s. I know your audience knows what these things mean. So 1099s are the individuals who come in on a contract basis. That will be a soloist with the orchestra, an opera singer, a choreographer, an actor. Those are the individuals who come in as independent contractors. Now, of the 3,000 W-2s, we have quite a wide variety. We have about 350 who are what we call administrative employees, HR, finance, marketing, fundraising. And we have about 350 also who are our ushers. They, of course, work on a seasonal basis based on the number of shows that we have. We have 16 unions at the Kennedy Center. And those range from 2 orchestras, the way we employ our parking lot attendants, the stage hands, the different kinds of stage crew. We have a wide variety of kinds of agreements, union agreements, and employee contracts with them as well. But volunteers are sort of the heart and soul of the Kennedy Center, and we have more than 600 volunteers. And those volunteers are really, in some ways, the beating heart of this organization. We have one volunteer who's been with us for more than 50 years. She was one of the earliest ones giving a tour of the Kennedy Center as it was being built. It's really, really a fantastic story.
Remarkable.
So we have people engage with us in a huge, wide variety of ways. I'm really proud because people have a real sense of connection to what happens inside the building and what happens as it's related to the building. Now, one of the things that is true about our programs is that our education initiatives in particular are national. And so a lot of the work that we do is by bringing people into the center for training and conventions and events. And we also go out to them across the country. That happened a lot more before the pandemic. And of course, during the pandemic, we were able to keep those going, but we did them all virtually. So thank goodness for the world of Zoom that we all know and appreciate so much now. So we've done quite a bit of virtual programming across the country. Just yesterday, I had a board meeting with my Kennedy Center board, and they really are from all over the country. So we had people Zooming into us from the middle of the country, from the north, from Florida, from California, the middle of the country, as I mentioned. We've got a board member from Arkansas, though he was here in person yesterday. So the Zoom has helped us stay connected to quite a number of people. But we're the live performing arts business. That's what I do, is we sell tickets to show you a show, to give you a concert, to invite you in to have an experience here in person. And we do that more than we offer the virtual field trips, which have been so important for our education programs. As a result, we really have a lot of people in the building all the time. So yes, the virtual hybrid workforce is very much alive, and it has made life easier. Well, we're not really a 24-hour business, but we're pretty close to an 18-hour business. In that 18-hour business, that means that some of us are here really late. And being able to be hybrid means that we don't have to get up and be in the office to still be on the job the next day. So this has been a huge benefit for us to be able to stay maybe even more productive by being able to be hybrid.
Thanks so much for sharing that. A wide variety of employees, a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences, exposure to art, and probably even attachment to certain genres, whether it's ballet or the symphony world. Talk to us about some of the talent management wins beyond moving from a strictly in-person organization to moving to the hybrid model. But what other sorts of talent management wins has the Kennedy Center experienced over the last couple?
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting and what makes this work so stimulating in both those sort of challenging way and the positive way is that we have so many different types of personalities and skills that we bring to the workforce. So I have a very large number of individuals who what we call curators. They're the ones who understand the programming. They work with the artists agents, and the representatives. They work directly with the musicians and the actors. And those individuals really live in a creative world that is quite different from somebody who might work in our finance department or in our information technology department. So the different types of people who work at the Kennedy Center is what really makes it interesting, stimulating, and that level of creativity really special. That said, we absolutely need the other individuals who use the other side of the brain to keep us really strong and stable in terms of finance, HR, information technology. And that counterbalances the creative side of our community. And as I love to tell the brand new people and our interns, every single person at the Kennedy Center needs to understand how to do budgets. That's the one through line. No matter who you are, no matter what your skill base, you have to know how to manage budgets, because that's what nonprofit business is all about, right? Even more so, you can't rely on others. What's so interesting is, we've got carpenters and electricians. We've got stage managers. We've got violinists. I've got a curator who specializes in comedy. I've got a curator who specializes in contemporary dance. Think about the wide variety, and then think about the support mechanism for fundraising and marketing. It really is quite a diverse workforce, and that's what makes it really interesting. I know that our teams really love working across the center because it really is stimulating for them.
I can only imagine. I am a strong proponent of the arts myself, and my heart is warmed every time I walk into the Kennedy Center.
Looking to integrate talent into your mission strategic plan? During annual strategic planning, organizations often overlook what talent is needed to meet their goals. Partner with Nonprofit HR for your organization's talent management needs. We offer HR outsourcing and project-based consulting, including strategy and advisory, retained search, total rewards, and equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. We also offer customized trainings for your workforce. Join the many social impact organizations that have trusted Nonprofit HR to help them increase mission impact through their people. Visit nonprofithr.com.
But I would imagine there would be some challenges associated with that level of diversity in terms of workforce. How have you personally, as the CEO, leveraged organizational culture as a unifying kind of asset that you run through the organization to ensure that the carpenters and the stagehands and the dancers and the artist management all come together as one? Tell us a little bit about that secret sauce.
When I came to the Kennedy Center, I had been working in performing arts organizations across the country, really focused on orchestras, not on all of the arts the way this was. In an orchestral world, the culture is very deeply embedded in the musicians and the history of the ensemble and the city itself. When you came to the Kennedy Center, that same sense of tradition and commitment to the art is absolutely palpable here. But then there's another layer up, which is around the pride of working at the Kennedy Center because you feel so connected to President Kennedy. Now, this is a man who has not been with us for a long time, but the pride of serving in the memorial to him and the pride of serving in the nation's capital for the National Cultural Center really exceeds any other kind of value to a person at the Kennedy Center. There's a sense of sort of mission around serving your country, and it's really beautiful. So what transcends all other skills and all other personal values is the sense of service back to your country and to this institution. And that's not something I created. That is in the air. It bubbles up from
the legacy you inherited.
Yes. And in the very beginning of my time here, we spent time expressing what are our norms of behavior and what are our values. And what's interesting is that nobody could give to me the mission statement and the vision statement for the Kennedy Center other than what was written in the legislation and signed by Dwight Eisenhower. So we went through a process as an organization, developing our mission statement, our vision statement, and our values. Because it bubbled up from staff, it really is owned by staff. This is not some small group of people who said this is what it's going to be and imposed it on others. Not that that's wrong, but in this case, this really came from staff. And in fact, the first version was from 2015, but we just recently did it about 18 months ago. As we were coming out of the pandemic, writing a new strategic plan for our future, we took our former values and synthesized them. And actually, the values don't even sound much like an arts organization anymore. The words excellence and artistic and creativity are not the focal point of our values. It's really who are we and how do we want to treat one another? How do we treat our audiences? How do we, most importantly, engage as an artist-centric organization? What's really interesting is if you're a carpenter, or if you're an usher, or if you're a volunteer, or you're a member of the finance staff, you all really are connected to those values. And that is what brings a sense of community and a quality of experience here in the workforce.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. We are in the nation's capital, the heart of artistic creativity and expression, but we're also in the center of politics. Talk to us a little bit about how the arts has been a unifying force, not so much for your audiences, but for your employees. Does that transcend? Does that kind of weave its way through to the workforce in terms of leveling the playing field for staff and really bringing them together in a unique way, would you say?
So the Kennedy Center was created by a Republican president, endorsed by a Democrat. The money was being raised by the two of them, and then subsequently named for a Democrat as his memorial. Every year for these past 51 years now, we have received funding from the federal government in the form of an appropriation to support the physical structure, not the programming. The programming is like a nonprofit, but all of the physical structure is supported by the federal government. And as a result, we are a nonpartisan, bipartisan. We work hard to be nonpartisan, and sometimes it qualifies as bipartisan. And I'll tell you, at my board meeting yesterday, I had three ex officio members in the room, and representatives from maybe 6 others. But one was a Democratic representative from the House, and the other was a Republican. And our mayor was here at the meeting as well. And then I had representatives from quite a wide variety of the other ex officios as well, from State Department, Education, both the House and the Senate. What's really so remarkable for me is the fact that we are deeply respected for the work that we do here. And we work very, very, very hard to ensure that we are being nonpartisan in the work and how we present the work. We just ended a month-long festival called River Run, and it was really about rivers around the world, which you can't have a festival about rivers without talking about climate and the impact of climate and the impact of human behavior. We had a beautiful sculpture made out of plastic that had been drawn from the Potomac and from the Kennedy Center and George Washington University, and a beautiful sculpture made out of that plastic. Just to say, look at what we pulled out of the trash and what we created out of it. Mm-hmm. But we did not call for any kind of action or advocacy. We're just using art to tell the stories of who we are. And as a result, I think we are respected by our staff, our audiences, our donors, and certainly by the federal government for bringing the best of the world to our stages. I can tell you, I have 13 people in my office of the president, and I couldn't tell you who's a Democrat or who's a Republican. Of my donors, I can't really tell either. I can tell from my board because they're appointed by the President of the United States and the ex officios because of the role they play. But by and large, this isn't a part of the conversation. That said, I have a very active government relations team that really makes sure to look at what we do and how we do it with a lens to ensuring that we stay that way, that we are a place that is good and safe for all people, and that we not take political positions.
That's a great segue to a conversation around equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice. How has the Kennedy Center and the organizations connected to it, how has the arts world and the Kennedy Center navigated EDIJ issues over particularly the last 2 to 3 years? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that the Kennedy Center is in a strategically competitive position because we offer all the arts, both of our country and around the world. And I will say that it was from a very early time that I wanted to expand the offerings at the center to be truly reflective of art across the country and not just of the traditional art forms that find themselves in these big venues. And so probably for the last 6-7 years, we have been working really hard, strategically inviting with intention artists that have been underrepresented on our stages. Now, it's one thing to bring them to your stages, it's another to ensure that audiences are also invited. And so we have really thought about how to ensure that the invitation to come to the center and the sense of welcome at the center. So this is not just one set of ideas. It's one that is interconnected to just about every part of our work. Just before the pandemic, we opened an extension of the Kennedy Center called The Reach. It is about 75,000 square feet of spaces that can be used in a wide variety of ways. They're very transparent, lots of windows. They're very flexible in terms of what can be done within them. And the idea was that we will build it and they will come. It wasn't intentionally built for any one set of activities. These new spaces have proven to be really, really powerful for inviting our local community to come, to use them as a resource, for us to help them incubate work, for us to encourage them, and to invite those local groups to also help curate some of the programming on our stages. Very, very intentionally, we have changed the dynamic from the big Kennedy Center to the reaching out and offering a welcome and opening our ears, our hearts to also learning and understanding what others may need from us and may see as a barrier to participating with us. Our Performing Arts for Everyone division has morphed into being our social impact division. And we really think about the work of that extraordinary group of curators to imagine how we can be in greater partnership with artists who have not always been invited to be a part of the Kennedy Center family. Yeah. And very intentional about how we do our programming, who's invited to Millennium Stage, how we can celebrate and support artists and arts organizations that are not traditionally found on the Opera House stage, but who may over time find a way to that Opera House stage.
That's how you're representing inclusion on a community-facing basis. Can you talk to us about some of the practices you've engaged in internally to ensure that the staff are experiencing that same level of inclusion and welcome and diversity that you're intentionally focusing on the outside?
Yeah. Extremely, extremely fortunate to have as my colleague and my chief administrative officer an individual that you introduced me to. And Barbara Polk happens to be just a charismatic, thoughtful leader who has brought new initiatives and ideas to both the basics of how we do our business and then how we further develop the culture of the institution. And we have seen growth at all levels of the organization, both at the most senior and then through the organization. And what's really great, we've seen individuals rise up within the organization with new perspective who offer another point of view, which is so incredibly valuable. Our culture is one of sincere openness to learning, to understand that in life, you're never done having an evolved relationship with your colleagues, your community. And that evolved relationship is one that is exciting, frankly. I mean, one of the things that I have loved is the creation of our DEI book club. The DEI book club this month is reading Disability Visibility. Last month, it was about rest as resilience. The first one was the Indigenous Person's History of the United States. You know, it started out small. There were only about 12 of us in the book club, and now there are 75.
I love it.
And each book discussion, it takes place, over 4 weeks. So you don't have to read it all at once, which is really great for people like me. And then is led by a section within the organization or somebody who might have proposed the book. So the Kennedy Center has a very, very important national and international footprint in disabilities, artists with disabilities, audiences with disabilities.
And employees, no doubt.
And employees. And so one of the individuals from our VSA accessibility division is leading this book club. The thing about a book club is you may not even really like the book for whatever reason, time or, the way it's written, whatever that might be. But there is a bonding around the topic that takes place. And you end up having conversations around the organization. Actually, the second book, so this is our fifth book. The second book was around psychological safety. The quality of conversation that took place seeped past the book club to the rest of the institution. It's hard not to. I mean, once you get a critical number, you start having other conversations. The book club is like the employee resource groups that we have now created as well. And those ERGs, you might have somebody who's involved in 2 ERGs. You might have one who's involved with more, or you might just be involved with one. But those ERGs are touching how we handle our staff meetings, what we're doing during the holiday party. Are we being appropriately inclusive across the board with our season kickoff picnic? We just had the Kinfolk Collective, which is the parents and caregivers, ERG, just had a Bring Your Loved One to Work Day.
Oh, lovely.
And while, 120 people participated in that, it again seeps into the culture of the institution. Barbara can't do and doesn't do all of these herself, but she is leading this work through the administrative services, through the HR team, and then into the rest of the organization, because each of these initiatives has an executive sponsor. So there's level of involvement, even though it might be run at a middle level or below middle level, it has that sort of sponsorship and involvement.
Which is really important.
We speak about wellness. We speak about opportunities for internal learning. And so by demonstrating an investment in our people, there's an awareness that we're all in this together and that we're all important for the success of the organization.
And that's as inclusive as you can possibly be.
Yeah, that's the intention.
That's right. I love it. I love it. As we wrap up our conversation today, Deborah, I wonder what advice might you have for other CEOs running national organizations with maybe a national workforce from a talent perspective? What advice do you have? What lessons have you learned over the last couple of years about you as a leader, how you show up, and the importance of talent in the workforce?
You've asked questions of me that I think we're all still asking ourselves. I will tell you that as I have conversations with colleagues across the country, we're all still scratching our heads as to exactly how am I doing this and is it working? There are still moments that feels like this workforce, while they're doing jobs that look similar to the jobs I knew 3-4 years ago, they somehow feel different. I'm having slightly different conversations. My personal approach is to come at this work with my understanding of the history of information. I have a lot of experience and I know that I have that to share. There's also a heavy dose of humility that we're still learning from other people, that there's certain values around service in particular and the quality of the work and how we engage with one another that I can lay out expectations, learning about the needs and the level of communication, the types of communication really have to be tinkered with, to be adjusted based on the circumstances that we find ourselves today. Absolutely, the day-to-day environment is different today than it was 3.5 years ago. And we really have to understand that we can't insist that it's going to go back and be exactly the way it was before.
It will not be.
It just will not. Now, you can expect that when you go to see a performance that it's going to start on time, that it's going to be comfortable in the space, that you're going to be safe in that space, that you're going to be treated with respect. Those things can stay the same. But the work that we do before and after that, and the way in which we support that, which is our product, absolutely is completely different. And I have to remind myself daily to pause, to make sure I turn the sound up. So I'm listening extra hard and trying to figure out how best to interpret what I'm hearing. Folks still want to be inspired. Folks really want to have a vision. They want to have information. They also want to provide feedback and input along the way as well. And I think that's one of the biggest differences today than it was 3-4 years ago. I remember being in a meeting, more than a decade ago, former position, where I sat with my leaders and said, okay, we need to agree on our values. And they said, oh, no, you just tell us what it'll be and we'll be fine with that. That
how times
will not be happening today.
Definitely not.
Even if you threw out a straw man, okay, these are some ideas. What do you think? And really, ultimately, one knows that that's the way things stick, is when everybody's invested in it. And people today are invested in a different way. They don't want to just be told, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah. The role of the CEO has definitely evolved and should continue to evolve as our workforces do. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have leading organizations, is to turn up the volume. I love that. And listen with more intent and with the recognition that we don't have all the answers, and that some of the best ideas for innovation and creativity and evolution happen from within the ranks of our staff.
Lisa, I think that the nonprofit sector is more and more important in our society. As we have watched very important corporate world do its business over time, there's great appreciation for that work. But I do believe that being mission-driven, which many corporations are, by the way, mission-driven, being true to your mission, being true to your values, is always going to pay the greater dividends, whether those dividends come in the form of appreciation of stock or in the delivery of programs. But I think that for us, nonprofit sector, we are increasingly important in our society. We are the ones to be addressing so many issues in our world. And I think that the corporate sector has to pay very close attention to the way we do our business. So you have a bigger job than ever with your company.
Well, thank you, Deborah. And we remain committed to serving the nonprofit space. It's been a joy. It's incredibly rewarding to see the impact that our firm and others like us have had on helping to kind of calibrate up talent management practices and to continue to challenge leaders to leverage the wonderful assets that live within their organizations by way of people for realizing better outcomes for those that they serve. And so you have the joy of being in a wonderful space like the Kennedy Center, taking in wonderful performances and educational programs. You've got one of the best jobs in the country. We applaud you for what you're doing, and thank you so much for your time today. As we wrap up, I wonder if you might share maybe one of your most meaningful or memorable experiences with a performance. What performance have you really, really enjoyed, or that's left an indelible impression on you that you'd like to leave us with this afternoon?
I have to be careful because I can never have a favorite. It's like if you had more than one child. That's why I only have one child.
That's just memorable.
Who's your favorite child? So I had a weekend a couple weekends ago that was so special. And it's because it was one of those amazingly busy weekends, and we had so much going on across the center. Carlos Simon is our composer in residence here at the Kennedy Center. Was born here, went to school in Atlanta, has come back here. He teaches at Georgetown in composition, as a matter of fact. And we got to know him through our own sort of composition mentoring program. And he is hugely popular across the center. and with artists in all of the disciplines. But on one weekend, 2 weeks ago, he had a world premiere with the National Symphony Orchestra, Janae Bridges, singing beautiful poetry that he had composed a song cycle for. And she performed Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And then at the same time, he was involved with a youth program that Renee Fleming and Mo Willems had created for little kids, where they chose some of the most popular arias of the canon. And Mo, who is if you don't know Mo, he's the Dr. Seuss of today, and he's a very, very popular children's author, illustrator. And he wrote new lyrics to all these arias. And then he's particularly known for his pigeon books. The pigeon does this, the pigeon does that. So Carlos, who had already written a little mini opera for Mo, wrote another little mini opera with the pigeon as the centerpiece and one of his stories. And again, that work was performed that same weekend 3 times. I have never, ever known any composer anywhere to have 6 world premiere performances in one weekend in one performing arts center. And all he did was walk from one side of the building to the other side of the building. I was so proud of him. And such extraordinary work. I mean, he was reaching, little kids with a funny story and a cute little opera. And then a very deep emotional song cycle with Janae Bridges. And it was just really, I will never forget that weekend, a very special weekend. And I'm really proud of our colleague as composer in residence.
Beautiful story. Wonderful way to end our conversation. Thank you so much for today, for your time and your insight. And we wish you and the staff of the Kennedy Center all the best.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Great to be with you.
Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Special thanks to our hosts, Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR, and Deborah Rutter, president for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Learn more about the Kennedy Center. Visit them online at kennedy-center.org and visit Nonprofit HR online at nonprofithr.com.